first and foremost, these houses, this land, these built assets are there to maximize benefit for community and for the people who live there.
Welcome to the Rotary Big Ideas podcast, where we celebrate big ideas that are sparking positive change in Ottawa and around the world. I'm your host, Bachir Bastien, and on each episode, we meet a change maker and a big idea. Today, our guest is Mike Bulthuis of the Ottawa Community Land Trust. He started his current role as a CEO a few years ago. So, Mike, what is your big idea?
Well, thank you for the invitation. Thanks for having me. As you said, I'm with the Ottawa Community Land Trust, and I think our big idea is that communities can work together to gain control of land and the assets on that land and use it for community benefit. And I think that is what we believe we are trying to help facilitate, but believe in the possibility of community working together to do just that.
So, tell me, what inspired your big idea?
So the land trust, our land trust, was created in 2021, incorporated as a nonprofit. And I refer to that. I wasn't with the land trust until a couple of years ago, but I think this big idea came from a movement of community land trusts, certainly across North America, and I'm happy to talk about that movement and what I think those organizations and communities have been working towards, and that is this community control of land. I think here in the Ottawa context, one of the big threads that led to our founding was a recognition that we were losing significant amounts of affordable housing. So, within Ottawa, we are building new affordable housing, and there are amazing nonprofits and cooperative housing providers and even some leading private sector organizations that are, often collaborating and helping to develop affordable housing, but it's not enough. And even with that new supply coming on board, we're actually losing more affordable housing than we are building. And so we often talk about something called naturally occurring affordable housing. And so these are units of primarily rental housing in the private market where the rent levels are, at or considerably less than average market values. And that's for a variety of reasons. But often when especially multi-unit buildings that have those affordable homes in them, often when they come for sale, a new owner might have a very different interest in that property. And so we see buildings being demolished. We see, renovations leading to what we often hear about renovictions. And often we just see rent levels changing, right? So if one tenant leaves and another one comes in, there's no rent control. And so we were seeing massive increases in those rents. And so all of that was leading to a significant loss of affordable housing in the community. And very few organizations had the capacity or the mandate to say, we need to buy that and try to preserve that affordable housing. And so that was one of the really significant conversations in Ottawa that led to the founding of the Ottawa Community Land Trust as an organization dedicated to trying to preserve that housing. So it was a local context. It was, an idea born out of many other communities. So that is the Community Land Trust. And I think these things came together and led folks to say, let's try this right here.
So usually people get into real estate to earn money. So I wonder, how do you balance this?
Yeah, I think, I think we do have a system and a structure here in Canada where that is exactly the case. And I see how important that can be. I think, however, that, housing has been, in many cases, it has been commodified, right? And when we think about the right to housing, I think that conversation is premised upon the recognition that housing is fundamental to our security, to our safety, to our quality of life. I think having a secure, safe, I'll add affordable place to live allows us, if we have a family, to, raise kids in a healthy environment. It allows us to without the stress of wondering where we're going to sleep or how we're going to pay our rent. It allows us to invest our energy in personal growth, professional growth, all kinds of attributes, all kinds of benefits, I think, of having that housing. Yes, I think for a lot of folks, housing also has an economic kind of benefit. But I think first and foremost, I would argue that we need to go back to, what is the purpose of housing? And I think it is a basic need. And I think it fosters all of those other outcomes I was just referring to. And so I think what we're trying to do is I guess remind us of that. And I think that that's what community land trusts are also trying to do is, serve as a reminder that first and foremost, these houses, this land, these built assets are there to maximize benefit for community and for the people who live there.
So I would like to ask you to share that big idea of yours in 5 words or less.
I think it's communities controlling land for community benefit.
That was awesome. Thank you for sharing.
I think it was
I'm
6 words, but I tried. I think that was
Oh,
6. But
we take six. We take
Okay,
six.
thank you.
So now I'm thinking in terms of challenges. So tell us, what kind of challenges do you face in implementing this big idea of yours?
One of the key commonalities across community land trusts in North America, and I think in other parts of the world as well, is trying to operate in an environment where economic forces are very strong and powerful, and financialized actors. And what we mean by that is, entities that are explicitly buying land or housing to earn a profit, right? Where that is the first and top interest, I guess, is to maximize that return to either them as an owner or shareholders and whatnot. And I think that is a core, essential element of our real estate system, and of our economy and the way cities and communities are built. And I think today, what's so exciting is, we see neighborhood community land trusts, places like Toronto, where you have the Kensington Market Land Trust or the Little Jamaica Land Trust, really trying to counter again those economic forces that are displacing communities that had lived in those neighborhoods for many generations and gave those communities the flavor and the characteristics that I think so many folks enjoy. And I think all of these are really fighting a lot of economic forces. And so just to maybe bring that home a little bit to our work in the Ottawa Community Land Trust, I mean, we're quite new, we're quite young. And so we've acquired a couple of properties now, but we're trying to, acquire what are currently commercial multi-unit, properties, when they hit the market. And when a property is on the market, it's priced at a level that, the owner, the seller believes the market would support. And so we are, in a sense, competing against any other purchaser, often with deeper pockets, often with, massive portfolios, often with equity that comes from different communities and different sources. And so at the end of the day, I mean, it is an economic challenge. And I think that, at a very high level, that is by far the biggest challenge that we face.
So I'm thinking, how might the Rotary Club get involved?
Well, it's a great question. And I think, Rotary clubs are made up of, committed members of the community. My understanding is, a cross-section of who lives in our community are also members of Rotary clubs. And I think for organizations like ours, there's no doubt that, we're member-led. And so members of the Rotary Club are welcome to become members of the Land Trust. I think membership for us is something that it's not a significant fee. It's a nominal fee, but it's more about, again, creating that momentum that comes from hundreds and hundreds of people adding their names to an organization, adding their time to an organization and saying, yes, the preservation of affordable housing or even the expansion of affordable housing in our community is important. But then also, we are community led, and we have a fairly small staff complement, but we have an amazing group of volunteers, and those volunteers are, we're run by a board. Of course, our board has various committees that support things like the acquisition process or asset management process, finance and audit. Community engagement is a big part of what we do. Happy to talk about some of the ways that we have raised capital to date And a lot of that is through engaging community and talking about new ways of pooling our assets and pooling our wealth as a community. And there too, we would welcome those kinds of contributions from members of the Rotary Club, right? I will say that often, I think that what we're trying to do spans so many different areas, right? We're in the real estate, we're in finance, we're in community development, we're in community health. And so there are so many different areas of expertise in the community that can help enrich what we do and can help enable our success.
So I want to know, how are you raising funds to acquire these buildings?
It's a great question. I would identify four kind of buckets of potential funding that could help make a purchase possible. And I'm thinking specifically about purchases that would enable the preservation of affordability, right? So often, if one was to raise rents, you could probably access a bigger mortgage because your revenue is going to be greater. But if we want to actually preserve affordable rents, what do we need? And so I think, first and foremost, like anyone, we can pursue conventional financing through a mortgage. We are very interested in leveraging community investment. Thirdly, we know that there is a really generous philanthropic community in Ottawa. And then lastly, it is about the preservation of affordable housing. We believe that there is a space for government in that work, right? Governments are funding the development of new housing. I would offer that there's also value in governments at all levels supporting the preservation of existing affordable housing, and more specifically, supporting tenants who currently have housing to remain housed, because often, in a renoviction or demolition, those tenants are losing their housing. So there's sort of those four buckets. So in our first property in Carlington, we knew that Councillor Jeff Leeper was willing to offer a community contribution through his ward. So we had that $400,000 that was effectively a city grant. We had someone from the community offer a gift. So we had a gift of $250,000, and that was enough for us to get a line of credit from a lender. And then our third bucket, community investment. And so earlier, I guess I can't say this year, but in early 2024, we launched our first community bond campaign. And so this was a really exciting development for us, and I think a new way of engaging the community. So a community bond is basically a term loan, a fixed rate of return for an investor. And so we sold bonds within the community. Neighbors, organizations, businesses could purchase a bond beginning at $1,000. You could purchase a bond for 3, 5, or 7 years. We were offering returns of between 3.5% and 4.5%. And we wanted to establish this pool of funds, and that's part of our business model, is to establish this revolving fund that we would then be able to tap when properties became available. So a predictable source of funds for us. So for our first property, we needed to still raise community investment to help pay off that line of credit and sort of transition our financing from the line of credit to community investment. And so we did launch Housing Forever bonds in the spring of 24. And we closed that campaign just before Christmas. We've now raised $3 million in community investment. So that was sufficient, not just for our first property. We've leveraged that fund now for a couple of other properties. And then, we will apply now for a conventional mortgage. And with the conventional mortgage, and we know that CMHC has a program where we can get a really favorable rate. So then we'll be able to actually repatriate some of that community investment back into this revolving fund that we're trying to create and use that to purchase another property. And so you see how those four sources of capital, we had the city grant, we had a gift, we've had this community investment, and now we'll translate some of that into a conventional mortgage. Like I said, our investment campaign went really well. And so by the fall of last year, we were able to acquire a second property, this time a 10-unit apartment building in Vanier. On that one, we haven't received a philanthropic gift, but we did receive a small contribution, again, from the city councillor in the area, Councillor Plot. And so between that contribution and then again, our community bonds and the mortgage, we can finance that property. So yeah, we're learning as we go, and now that we have, we've begun to capitalize that fund, and we're experimenting. Our due diligence on the financial side is really a big part of our work. Certainly, launching the sale of community bonds required a lot of rigor in establishing our financial model and our business model. I mean, we have to be able to show to investors that we have a 5-year, we have a 10-year plan to repay you when you want to be repaid or to reinvest that. And so, yeah, we're learning and we're learning as we go.
What you just said was really interesting. And then, so now I wonder if you have a way that you'd like our viewers to help, like a call to action.
You know, there was a recognition that our community, we have incredible needs, I will say. Like there are disparities, there are inequities, and there's a lot of work that we have to do. We are also an incredibly fortunate community. There's a lot of wealth in this community. There are a lot of assets. And I think sometimes our lens gets kind of colored by the lack of resources, I guess, and the restraint that I think we face. At the end of the day, how do we shift our mindset from scarcity to one of value and one of wealth? And I think what we're trying to do, I think, is share with the community a belief that by working together, and maybe by working in some new ways, by pooling our resources, we can actually achieve some pretty incredible things to support community well-being. So I think that's this kind of mindset that I think we're trying to bring. I think the community bond campaign is one expression of that. Not everyone in the community is in a position to invest in that way, but I think with an entry of 1,000, a lot of folks can. And so, how do we use our community wealth to support community? Invest in the well-being of our neighbors and those who live in this community. But I think we can do that too through, how do we facilitate more community engagement? So last summer we were often at farmers markets and garage sales on weekends, trying to have conversations with people, about like what kind of housing should we be keeping? What kinds of neighborhoods do we want to have in Ottawa in 5, 10, 20 years? And what actions do we need to take now to kind of help preserve and create those neighborhoods? So I think that there are spaces. What we're trying to do is create spaces for folks to be engaged through pooling our financial resources, through pooling our expertise. And yeah, I think our call to action would be to, for us, I think, become aware of who we are and what we're trying to do. And like I said earlier, we invite folks to become members. But I think it's also to become aware that we don't have to accept, I guess, some of the challenges that we're facing. And so the fact that so many people are losing their housing and folks are being displaced from communities, it doesn't have to be that way. I think there are alternatives. We're working at trying to create some of those alternatives. And the more the community is part of that, I think the more that we can do. We want to grow a community portfolio that is available to the community.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Mike. It was a pleasure having you on our podcast. Thank you for listening and watching. And keep in mind, if you want to make a difference or have a big idea to help others, Rotary is a great organization to connect with and become part of. Check us out. Until next time then, when I ask, what's your big idea?